At 68, I found myself standing on the sidewalk with a small suitcase in my hand, watching the door of my own house close in front of my eyes. The cold of that night bit into my bones, but the pain that tore my soul apart was far worse. I still remember the sound of that door closing, a blunt thud that marked the end of one life and the beginning of another. I never would have imagined. My name is Evelyn, and this is my story. A story that starts with betrayal but ends with hope. Because even though my own children threw me out like old furniture, I found in that abandonment the courage to rebuild myself from the ashes. That night I had prepared a simple dinner, lentil soup with rice, nothing special, because for months I had noticed that nobody cared what I cooked. I washed the dishes with that bitter taste that comes from loneliness, even when you're surrounded by people. As I cleaned the kitchen, I heard whispers coming from the living room. Low voices, hurried, nervous. A mother always knows when something is wrong. It's like a sixth sense that warns you before the storm arrives. My heart sped up as I dried the last glass. "It's just your imagination, Evelyn," I told myself. But I knew it wasn't. I took 2 steps towards the living room and silence fell like a stone slab. The 3 of them were there. My 3 children. Robert, the oldest, arms crossed with that hard expression he had inherited from his father. Lisa, my only daughter, looking at the floor, unable to lift her eyes. And Tom, the youngest, the one who had always been my favorite, was the first to speak. "Mom, we need to talk to you." The most dreaded phrase for any mother. I tried to smile, to calm the pounding of my heart that echoed in my ears. I sat in my old armchair, the one I had bought with years of savings from cleaning other people's houses, the same one where I had rocked each of my children when they were babies. "What is it, my dears?" I asked with a thin voice. Lisa was the one who started, always the most sensitive, although that night her sensitivity seemed to have vanished. "Mom, things are really tough financially. The house needs repairs. The bills keep going up." I watched her as she spoke, seeing how she avoided looking directly at me. Her hands fidgeted nervously with the hem of her blouse. "We've been thinking about a solution that's better for everyone," she continued. "Better for everyone?" I repeated, trying to understand where that conversation was heading. Then Robert, always so pragmatic, blurted out the words that would change my life forever. "Mom, we need you to leave this house." The world stopped. I felt the air leave my lungs, the ground beneath my feet disappear. For a moment I thought I had misheard. "Leave? My own house?" My voice sounded distant, as if it belonged to someone else. "I paid for this house. Every brick, every tile. How can I leave?" I tried to laugh, thinking it was perhaps a cruel joke that at any moment they would say they just wanted to see my reaction, but no one smiled. Lisa tried to take my hand, but I pulled it away. I didn't want her false comfort. "This can't be true," I murmured as I felt the walls begin to close in around me. "We've already decided," Robert said firmly. "The house has been in the 3 of your names since Dad died, and we need to sell it." "Why? What have I done to deserve this?" Tears began to blur my vision, but I refused to let them fall. I wouldn't cry in front of them. Lisa tried to explain that it was for my own good, that I would be better off, that they would help me find a place. Empty words that vanished before reaching my ears. Because while she was talking, Tom had already brought a suitcase, a small suitcase where they had put some of my belongings. Clothes, a brush, my medications, the photo of my wedding that I kept on the nightstand. It was clear they had been planning it for a while. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. They had calculated when and how to get me out of my own home. "We've reserved a room for you in a retirement home," Tom said, holding out a paper with an address. "It's temporary until we find something better." I took the paper with trembling hands. The address was on the other side of the city, far from everything I knew. From my neighbors, from the bakery where I bought bread every morning, from the park where I took my walks. "What if I don't want to leave?" I asked, finding a last shred of courage. Robert's face hardened even more. "It's not an option, Mom. It's already decided." And so, without more time to process it, without a chance to say goodbye to my home, to my memories, I found myself at the door with the suitcase in my hand and my heart in pieces. "We'll call you tomorrow to see how you are," Lisa said, as if that could comfort me. The door closed and I was left alone on the sidewalk, under a starless sky. The cold chilled me to the bone, but not as much as the abandonment I felt. For the first time in my 68 years, I had nowhere to go. My legs wouldn't respond. I wanted to run, to scream, to bang on that door until they let me back in. But I knew they wouldn't. In an instant, I had gone from being a mother and homeowner to being a homeless elderly woman. I sat on the curb, unable to take another step. The tears I had held back burst forth uncontrollably. I cried for my children, for their ingratitude, for the years dedicated to caring for them, for the sacrifices they never valued, for the sleepless nights watching over their fevers, for the extra jobs to pay for their studies. How long did I sit there? I don't know. Time lost its meaning. The streets were empty. The night was advancing and the cold was getting more intense. Finally, I got up. I had to find shelter. I started walking aimlessly, dragging the suitcase that seemed to weigh tons. Every step was an effort, as if my feet were glued to the asphalt. The city at night was different, threatening. Shadows stretched, noises startled me. I passed the bakery where I had bought bread for years. It was closed, but the smell of freshly baked bread seemed to have permeated the walls. My stomach growled, reminding me that I had barely eaten anything at dinner. I kept walking until I reached the neighborhood square. I sat on a bench under the faint light of a street lamp. I took my phone out of my bag with hands numb from the cold. I had to call someone, look for help. I looked at my contacts. Siblings I hadn't spoken to in years. Friends who had disappeared over time. Neighbors I barely greeted. Who could I call? Who would open their door to an elderly woman in the middle of the night? As I stared at the screen, I saw that I had several messages in the family WhatsApp group. With a pounding heart, I opened the conversation. "She's gone now. Tomorrow we can start organizing the sale of the house." It was a message from Robert. The words hit me like a punch. Not only had they kicked me out, but they were planning to get rid of everything I had built in my life. I closed my eyes, feeling the world spin around me. I wanted to scream, to beg them to let me come back, to plead with them to love me again. But I knew nothing would change their decision. To them, I no longer existed. The square emptied as the night wore on. The shadows grew denser, the cold more biting. A stray dog approached, sniffed me, and continued on its way, as if it understood that I too was lost. I needed to find somewhere to spend the night. Then I remembered Dolores, an old friend from my youth. We had lost touch years ago, but I knew she lived nearby. Would she remember me? Would she open her door? With the little strength I had left, I got up and started walking towards her house. Every step was a superhuman effort. The fatigue, the cold, the emotional pain, it all mingled, becoming an impossible weight to bear. I reached her building entrance and rang the doorbell. I waited. Nothing. I tried again. this time more insistently. Silence. My heart pounded wildly. Maybe she didn't live there anymore. Maybe she was asleep. Maybe she didn't want to open the door at that hour. Just as I was about to give up, the door opened. Dolores appeared, her gray hair pulled back in a braid, and a robe tied at her waist. She looked at me in surprise, narrowing her eyes to recognize me. "Evelyn, is that you?" I tried to smile, but my face was stiff with cold and tears. "Dolores, it's been so long." My voice was broken. "I'm sorry to bother you at this hour, but..." She noticed my suitcase, my disheveled appearance, my eyes swollen from crying. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't hold back anymore. The tears flowed uncontrollably again. "My children kicked me out of the house." The phrase sounded absurd, unreal. "I have nowhere to go." Without asking more, Dolores opened the door completely. "Come in, for goodness sake. It's freezing out there." I entered her house with the feeling of living a nightmare. The warmth of the interior greeted me like a hug, making my frozen cheeks begin to burn. Her house smelled of coffee and an old perfume that momentarily transported me to happier times. Dolores guided me to the sofa, where I collapsed, exhausted. She watched me with concern as I nervously fiddled with the handle of my suitcase. "I'll fix you something hot," she said, heading to the kitchen. I looked around. Dolores's house was modest but cozy. Family photos on the walls, an old television, plants in the corners, a home, something I no longer had. She returned with a steaming cup of milk with honey and a plate of cookies. "Eat something, Evelyn. You're as pale as a ghost." I hadn't realized how hungry I was until the aroma of hot milk reached my nose. I took a sip and felt the warm liquid travel down my throat, momentarily comforting me. "Thank you, Dolores. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't opened the door." She sat across from me, with that direct gaze she had always had. "What happened? Why would your children do something like this?" And then, between tears and sips of hot milk, I told her everything. The contempt, the cold words, the carelessly packed suitcase, the door closing behind me. I told her about the fear I felt being alone in the street, the humiliation of being rejected by my own children. Dolores listened in silence, nodding occasionally, sighing at the most painful details. When I finished, she took my hands in hers. "Evelyn, I'm so sorry. No one deserves to have something like this done to them, especially not a mother." The sincerity of her words finally broke me. The crying returned, but this time it was different. It wasn't just pain. It was also relief at having found refuge, even if only temporary. "I have nowhere to go, Dolores. I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow or the day after." She squeezed my hands firmly. "You're staying here tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure something out." She led me to a small room with a single bed and clean sheets that smelled of lavender. She helped me unpack, carefully placing my clothes in an empty closet, simple gestures that contrasted brutally with the way my children had packed my belongings. "Rest, Evelyn. It's been a very hard day." When she closed the door, I sat on the bed, feeling strange in that unfamiliar space. The tears had stopped, but an immense emptiness had settled in my chest. The image of my children closing the door repeated over and over in my mind. I lay down without undressing, too exhausted to even change. My body ached, my head throbbed, but the worst was the pain in my soul. As sleep overcame me, a question spun incessantly in my mind. How could children kick their mother out onto the street? The first ray of sun that peeked through the window woke me with a start. For a moment, I didn't recognize where I was. The unfamiliar room, the bed that wasn't mine. And then I remembered everything, My children, the suitcase, the cold street, Dolores. I sat up slowly. Every muscle in my body protested. Every bone seemed to have turned to glass during the night. I heard noises coming from the kitchen. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. I got up, got ready as best I could with the little I had, and left the room. Dolores was making breakfast. She smiled at me with that warmth I had forgotten existed. "Good morning, Evelyn. Were you able to rest?" The truth was, no. I had slept in fits and starts, waking up constantly with nightmares where my children chased me, where I fell into a bottomless pit, where I screamed and no one heard me. "A little," I lied, not wanting to appear more pathetic than I already felt. I sat at the table while she served coffee and toast. The normalcy of that breakfast contrasted with the chaos that was my life at that moment. "I've been thinking," Dolores said after a while. "I know someone who might be able to help you." I looked at her with curiosity. Who could help me in this situation? My niece works for an organization that supports women in difficult situations. It's not just for victims of violence. They also help elderly women who are alone or without resources. A social services center. The mere idea made my stomach clench. I, Evelyn Miller, who had worked all my life, who had raised 3 children, who had never asked anyone for anything, now needed charity. "I don't know, Dolores," I murmured, stirring my coffee without drinking it. "I've never needed that kind of help." She looked at me seriously. "Evelyn, everyone needs help sometimes. There's no shame in it." Her words stuck in my mind. Did I really have another option? I couldn't stay at Dolores's house indefinitely. I didn't have enough money to rent my own place. My children had abandoned me. I was alone and scared. "Do you think they could really help me?" Dolores nodded with conviction. "My niece says they do wonderful work. They can offer you temporary housing, help you find a job if you need one, give you legal advice." "Legal?" "From what you've told me, that house is partially yours. Your children can't just kick you out and sell it without your consent." I hadn't thought about that. The house had been put in the names of the 4 of us, my 3 children and me, after my husband passed away. Did they really have the right to kick me out? "I don't want to sue my children," I said in a thin voice, although a part of me felt they deserved it. "No one's talking about lawsuits, Evelyn, but you should know your rights." We finished breakfast in silence. My mind was a whirlwind of contradictory thoughts. On the one hand, the idea of going to social services felt humiliating. On the other hand, what alternative did I have? "Can I call my niece?" Dolores asked, breaking the silence. "Just to get some information. We don't have to decide anything now." I nodded slightly. If I could at least understand my options, maybe I would find a way through that darkness. While Dolores was on the phone, I checked my own. No calls, no messages from my children. Lisa's promise to call me had been as empty as all her words the night before. They no longer cared if I was well or not, alive or dead. When Dolores returned, her expression was optimistic. "Patricia says we can go today to visit the center. They're not forcing anything, just so you can see what it's like and talk to them." I felt trapped between the fear of the unknown and the need to find a solution. Finally, I nodded. "All right, I'll go see it." That day, under a sky covered with gray clouds that threatened rain, we took the bus to the other side of the city. I felt like a stranger in my own body. I had never imagined that at 68 I would be in this situation, traveling to a social services center after being kicked out of my own home by my children. The city passed by the bus window like a reminder of the life that went on, oblivious to my personal tragedy. People walking quickly, children playing in parks, elderly people sitting on benches enjoying the warm winter sun, a normal life that I no longer had. We got off on a quiet street of old but well-maintained buildings. A discreet sign announced, New Hope Women's Support Center. My stomach clenched again. I never thought I would be one of those women who need support. Dolores squeezed my hand, giving me courage. We entered the building together. The interior was bright and welcoming. Nothing like the cold, institutional image I had imagined. Plants in the corners, soft-colored walls, photographs of smiling women. A middle-aged woman with her hair in a bun and light-rimmed glasses approached us with a kind smile. "You must be Evelyn. I'm Eleanor, the center's director. Patricia told me about you." Her tone was warm, without a trace of pity or condescension. Still, I felt myself shrink, ashamed of my situation. "Thank you for having us," Dolores murmured, seeing that I was unable to respond. "It's a pleasure. Would you like some coffee while I show you around?" I nodded, clinging to the normalcy of that everyday gesture. Coffee, something I had done thousands of times in my life. As we toured the center, Eleanor explained how everything worked. They had shared rooms for temporary residents, a common room, a dining room, even a small library. They offered legal advice, psychological support, training workshops, and job placement assistance. "Many women come here thinking their life is over," Eleanor explained as we walked. "They leave realizing it's just a new beginning." Those words resonated within me, although I wasn't sure I believed them. How could it be a new beginning? At my age? After losing everything? We met some of the residents, women of all ages and situations. Some fleeing abusive relationships, others who had lost their jobs and homes, some older like me, abandoned by their families. One of them, a gray-haired woman named Rose, approached us in the common room. She had a serene smile that contrasted with the hardness in her eyes. "Are you new?" she asked me directly. "I'm just visiting," I replied, feeling uncomfortable. She nodded as if she understood perfectly. "I was just visiting 6 months ago. Now this place has saved my life." I watched her with curiosity. She didn't seem like a defeated or desperate woman. There was a dignity in her bearing, a serenity in her gaze that didn't fit her story. "What happened to you?" I asked before I could stop myself. "My husband died. My children sold the house without consulting me and left me on the street. The usual story." The usual story. It surprised me that there were so many women like me, so many mothers abandoned by their children. "And now?" Rose smiled again, this time with a sparkle of pride in her eyes. "Now I work at the public library. I have my own small apartment. I have friends. I have a life." Her testimony ignited a small spark of hope in my chest, so faint I barely recognized it. At the end of the visit, Eleanor invited us to her office to talk more quietly. "Evelyn, I understand this is very difficult for you. No one is prepared for something like this, especially at your age. But I want you to know that you have a place here if you need it." I looked at Dolores, seeking her silent advice. She squeezed my hand gently. "You don't have to decide right now," Eleanor continued. "But if you want to stay, we have a bed available. You could try it for a few days, see how you feel." The idea of staying in a center for vulnerable women was still hard to accept. I, who had always been independent, who had raised 3 children, who had worked tirelessly, after being widowed, now needed this kind of help. But what alternative did I have? I couldn't abuse Dolores' hospitality indefinitely. I didn't have enough money to rent my own place, and going back to my children, that door seemed to have closed forever. "Can I think about it?" I asked with a trembling voice. "Of course," Eleanor replied. "Take all the time you need." Back at Dolores' house, I sat in silence, looking out the window. Night was falling, painting the sky in shades of orange that slowly faded. Just like my former life, I thought bitterly. "What are you going to do?" Dolores asked, sitting across from me. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Everything has happened so fast." "You can stay here a few more days while you decide." Her generosity moved me to tears. "You've already done too much for me, Dolores. That's what friends are for." Friends. It was true we had been friends in our youth, but it had been so long. And yet, she had opened her door to me when I needed it most, without hesitation. "I think I'll try it," I said finally. "The center, I mean." It wasn't an easy decision, but it seemed the most sensible. There I would have support, guidance, perhaps even the possibility of rebuilding my life somehow. "That sounds good." Dolores nodded. "And remember, you can always come back, here if it doesn't work out." That night, lying in the borrowed bed, I thought about everything I had lost. My home, my memories, my family. But also about what I had found. Dolores' friendship, the possibility of a new beginning at New Hope, Rose's story of having rebuilt her life. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time since that terrible night my children kicked me out, I felt that maybe, just maybe, there was a path forward. And with that thought, I fell asleep, dreaming of doors closing and others opening, of dark paths that, little by little, were beginning to light up. Block 2. The first night at the center was strange and difficult. I was assigned a shared room with 3 other women. The mattress was too soft, the pillow too high, and the street noises filtered through the poorly insulated window. But the worst were the thoughts that kept turning in my head without rest. Would my children miss me? Would they have noticed the emptiness I had left? Or would they already be busy selling the house, dividing my things like vultures over carrion? Tears silently wet my pillow as I tried to stifle my sobs so as not to wake my roommates. The next morning started early. At 7, a gentle bell woke us. I got up with a sore body and a cloudy mind. One of my roommates, a young woman with her hair in a ponytail, smiled at me timidly. "Breakfast is at 8. The showers are down the hall. If you need anything, just ask." I thanked her with a nod. I didn't feel strong enough to talk, to explain who I was, why I was there. Shame closed my throat. The dining room was a large hall with long tables where the residents sat together. I sat in a corner, away from the others. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want them to ask me questions. I just wanted to be invisible, to disappear. An older woman approached with a tray and sat across from me without asking permission. Her hair was completely white, pulled back in a simple bun, and deep wrinkles marked her face like a map of life. "You're the new one, aren't you?" she asked as she spread jam on her bread. I nodded without lifting my gaze from my coffee cup. "My name is Eleanor. I've been here for 3 months." I didn't answer. I didn't want to start a conversation. I didn't want to tell my story. I didn't want anyone to know that my own children had abandoned me like an old dog. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to," she continued, unfazed by my silence. We all go through that phase. The silence, the denial, the anger. It's normal. I looked up, surprised by her frankness. "Do you think your life is over?" she asked, looking directly at me with gray eyes that seemed to see beyond my facade. "If it's not over, it's pretty close," I replied bitterly, the first words I had spoken that morning. Eleanor smiled, a tired but genuine gesture. "I thought the same thing when I arrived. My husband of 40 years left me for a younger woman. He sold our house without telling me and left me with nothing. I thought at my age all I had left was to wait for death." I watched her more closely. Despite her story, she didn't seem like a defeated woman. There was a dignity in her posture, a serenity in her gaze that didn't fit her narrative. "And what changed?" I asked, genuinely intrigued. "I changed," she replied simply. "Or rather, I discovered that I could still change." Her words hung in the air between us. We finished breakfast in silence, but something had changed. Eleanor had planted a seed in my mind, an idea that seemed impossible but persistent. Maybe my life wasn't over yet. That morning, Eleanor, the director, called me to her office for an initial interview. I felt like a child on the first day of school, nervous and out of place. "Evelyn," she smiled as I entered. "I'm glad you decided to stay with us." I sat in the chair opposite her desk, twisting the hem of my blouse between my fingers. "I didn't have many options," I murmured. "There are always options," she replied calmly. "You chose not to give up. That's the first step." I hadn't seen it that way. To me, coming to a help center was the ultimate proof of my failure as a mother, as a person. "Tell me a little about yourself," Eleanor continued. "Not just what brought you here, but who you are." I drew a blank. Who was I? For decades, I had been Manuel's wife, Robert, Lisa, and Tom's mother. When Manuel died, I remained the widowed mother who kept the family together. But now, without a home, without family, who was I? I don't know, I admitted, feeling tears threatening to well up again. Eleanor nodded as if my answer didn't surprise her at all. "It's normal, Evelyn. Many of us build our identity around our family roles. When those roles disappear, we feel lost. All my life I've been a mother," I said in a thin voice. "I've worked. I've taken care of my children, of my home. And now you have the opportunity to discover who Evelyn is beyond being a mother," she finished. The idea seemed absurd. Discovering myself at 68? It was too late. "I don't know if I can," I confessed. "You don't have to do it alone," Eleanor assured me. "That's what we're here for." She explained how the center worked in more detail. In addition to housing and meals, they offered workshops, support groups, legal advice. I was particularly surprised when she mentioned that they also helped women find jobs. "Jobs? At my age?" Eleanor smiled. "Age is just a number, Evelyn. You have experience, skills, knowledge. There's a lot you can offer." For the first time in days, I felt a spark of something akin to hope. It wasn't much, barely a glimmer of light in the darkness that surrounded me. But it was there. Upon leaving the interview with Eleanor, I found Eleanor waiting for me in the hallway. "Fancy a walk?" she asked. "There's a park nearby." I hesitated. I wasn't sure I wanted company, but the alternative was to go back to the room and sink into my dark thoughts. "Okay," I finally agreed. The park was small but welcoming. Old trees cast pleasant shadows on the wooden benches. Children played in the playground, their laughter filling the air. Elderly people fed the pigeons. Couples strolled hand in hand. Normal life, the life I no longer had. We sat on a secluded bench. The fresh air felt good, clearing some of the fog from my mind. "The first week is the hardest," Eleanor commented, breaking the silence. "But then, little by little, you start to breathe again." I glanced at her. She didn't seem to be just saying it to comfort me. She was speaking from experience. "How did you do it?" I asked. "How did you keep going?" Eleanor took a deep breath before answering. "One day at a time. At first, I just tried to survive. Then I started participating in the workshops, meeting other women, listening to their stories. I realized I wasn't alone, not being alone. It was a strange concept for me. Who felt more alone than ever? And then I met Anna," Eleanor continued with a smile. "Anna? One of the center's volunteers. She works as a housekeeper at a hotel. One day she mentioned they needed cleaning staff and I decided to apply. I've been working there for 2 months. The surprise must have shown on my face because Eleanor laughed softly. At my age, right? I thought so too. But it turns out I have cleaning experience. I'm responsible and hardworking. They didn't care that I was 65. And do you like it? I asked, genuinely interested. It's not my dream job, she admitted frankly. But it gives me independence. I'm saving to rent my own apartment. And most importantly, it gave me back my dignity. Dignity. That word resonated within me. It was exactly what I felt I had lost the night my children kicked me out of the house. I don't know if I could, I murmured, more to myself than to her. Of course you could, she stated with such conviction that I almost believed her. What do you know how to do, Evelyn? The question caught me off guard. What did I know how to do? I had been a housewife most of my life, but I had also worked cleaning houses, babysitting, and for a few years cooking in a small restaurant. I know how to cook, I finally replied. I worked in a restaurant kitchen before my youngest son was born. Eleanor nodded, as if that answer confirmed something she already knew. Well, there you go. The world always needs good cooks. Her optimism seemed naive but also comforting. What if I could really find a job? What if I still had something to offer? Don't stress yourself out, Eleanor said, reading my expression. Rome wasn't built in a day. For now, just focus on breathing. Breathing. It seemed like simple advice, but the truth was that since that fatal night, I felt as if a huge weight was pressing on my chest, making every breath difficult. We returned to the center as the sun began to set. I felt strangely lighter after our conversation. It wasn't that my problems had disappeared, but at least now I could imagine a future, however uncertain. That night at dinner, I sat next to Eleanor instead of looking for a solitary corner. I met other women. Adele, who had fled an abusive husband after 30 years of marriage. Sophia, who had lost her house after losing her job. Maria, who had arrived undocumented and was trying to legalize her situation. They all had different stories, but they shared something. The determination to keep going despite everything. Their strength impressed me and, in a way, shamed me. Why was it so hard for me? When I went to bed that night, the thoughts were still spinning in my head. But they were different. I was no longer just asking myself why my children had done this to me, but also what I would do with my life now. The days began to settle into a routine. I woke up early, had breakfast with the other residents, attended the workshops offered by the center. There were basic computer classes, craft workshops, cooking classes, also support groups where women shared their experiences. At first, I resisted participating, limiting myself to listening in silence. But little by little, encouraged by Eleanor and by Eleanor, I began to open up. I shared my story, my fears, my pain. And I discovered that talking, even though it hurt, also relieved. One afternoon during a computer workshop, Eleanor approached me with an enigmatic expression. "Evelyn, can I talk to you for a moment?" I followed her to her office, wondering what she wanted. Had I done something wrong? Would they kick me out of there too? "I have something that might interest you," she said once we were seated. "Do you remember telling me you had worked in a kitchen?" I nodded, intrigued. "Well, I have a contact at a hotel nearby. They need kitchen staff. Nothing complicated. Preparing breakfasts, helping with simple meals. I thought of you. I was speechless. A job. For me." "I don't know if I'm ready," I finally murmured. "It's been many years since I worked in a professional kitchen." "It's a simple job, Evelyn, and it would be part-time to start. Don't you think it's at least worth trying?" The idea terrified and excited me in equal measure. What if I failed? What if I wasn't good enough? What if? "And what if it goes well?" Eleanor said, as if reading my thoughts. "And what if it's the first step to regaining your independence?" Independence. The word resonated in my mind. Could I really stand on my own 2 feet again? "Okay," I finally accepted. "I'll try it." Eleanor smiled, satisfied. "Perfect. The interview is tomorrow at 10. I'll go with you myself." That night, I barely slept. Nerves kept me awake, imagining 1,000 different scenarios for the next day's interview. I saw myself clumsy, forgetting basic recipes, unable to keep up. But also, in some fleeting moments, I imagined myself succeeding, feeling the satisfaction of creating dishes that people enjoyed again, of being valued for my work, of earning my own money. The morning arrived too soon and too late at the same time. I dressed in the best I had, which wasn't much. A light blue blouse and black pants that Dolores had given me. Eleanor lent me some comfortable but presentable shoes. "You look perfect," she assured me as we left the center. Natural and professional. The hotel wasn't luxurious, but it was clean and well-maintained. A medium-sized family establishment. The human resources manager, a middle-aged woman named Laura, greeted us kindly. "So you have kitchen experience," she commented after the introductions. "Yes, I worked in a restaurant for several years," I replied, trying to keep my voice from trembling. "And I've cooked for my family all my life." "Why did you leave the restaurant?" she asked. I didn't expect that question. The truth was, I had left when I got pregnant with Tom, and my husband insisted I stay home. I had to dedicate myself to taking care of my family. I replied without going into detail. Laura nodded as if she understood perfectly. "And now you want to go back to work?" It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "I need to go back to work, not just for the money, but for myself." My sincerity seemed to please her. She smiled slightly. "The position isn't complicated," she explained. "You'd prepare breakfast, with another cook, and then help with lunch. Part-time, from 7 to 1. The salary isn't much, but—" "I'm interested," I interrupted, surprising myself with my determination. The interview continued with questions about my culinary skills, my experience with suppliers, my familiarity with hygiene standards. I answered as best I could, feeling confidence grow within me with each answer. When we left the hotel, Eleanor looked at me with a smile. "You did very well, Evelyn." "Do you think so?" I asked, still unsure. Absolutely. Laura told me she'll call you this afternoon. And indeed, that same afternoon I received the call. The job was mine if I wanted it, starting the next day. That night at dinner, I shared the news with Eleanor and the others. Their sincere congratulations, their hugs, their words of encouragement made me feel something I thought was lost forever: pride. To Evelyn, Eleanor toasted, raising her glass of water. May this be just the first of many steps. The others raised their glasses, smiling, supporting me. At that moment, surrounded by women who were strangers until recently, I felt something strange and wonderful. Belonging. It wasn't the family I had lost, but it was a form of community, a support I didn't expect to find. My first day of work was exhausting, but exhilarating. My hands remembered movements I thought I had forgotten. My mind was stimulated with each task. The head chef, Sam, a man around 50 with a thick mustache, was demanding but fair. Not bad for your first day, he told me at the end of the shift. That not bad tasted like victory. It wasn't compassion or condescension. It was genuine recognition of my work. Days turned into weeks. Every morning I woke up with a purpose. Every night I went to bed with the satisfying tiredness of a job well done. My body, accustomed to years of domestic labor, quickly adapted to the rhythm of the kitchen. But the most surprising thing was how my mind changed. I no longer spent hours dwelling on my children's abandonment, on what I had lost. Now I thought about recipes, about how to improve a dish, about conversations with my friends at the center, about plans for the future. Because for the first time since that fatal night, I was starting to think about the future. A future of my own, not as an appendage to my children or my late husband. One day, while cleaning the kitchen after service, Sam approached me. Evelyn, can I talk to you for a moment? My heart skipped a beat. Had I done something wrong? Would I be fired? Mrs. Lewis, the owner, is very happy with your work, he said, surprising me. She wants to know if you'd be interested in increasing your hours, full-time, with a small raise. The joy I felt at that moment was indescribable. It wasn't just the prospect of earning more money. It was validation, confirmation that I was truly worthwhile, that I could be useful, that I had a place in the world. I'd love to, I replied without hesitation. Sam smiled, shaking my hand to seal the deal. I knew you'd say yes. You've got what it takes, Evelyn. That afternoon, back at the center, I ran to tell Eleanor the news. Her expression of pride moved me. See? I told you could do it. Thanks to you, I replied sincerely. If you hadn't given me that opportunity, I just opened a door, Evelyn. You were the one who had the courage to walk through it. She was right. Despite the fear, the insecurity, I had taken the step, and now I was beginning to reap the rewards. With my first full paycheck, I allowed myself a small luxury. I bought new clothes. Nothing fancy, just some basic items so I wouldn't have to rely on borrowing. But as I looked at myself in the mirror with that new blouse, I felt like I was seeing a different woman. It wasn't the abandoned mother, the homeless elderly woman. It was Evelyn, a woman rebuilding her life brick by brick. The next step came one afternoon when Eleanor called me to her office again. This time there was a man with her, a gentleman in his 60s, gray-haired but with lively, alert eyes. Evelyn, I'd like you to meet George. He's a social worker and collaborates with us on the housing program. We shook hands, intrigued by his presence. George can help you find more permanent housing, Eleanor explained. Now that you have a stable job. The idea of leaving the center gave me mixed feelings. On the one hand, I yearned for my own space, to regain my complete independence. On the other hand, I had grown accustomed to the security and companionship that New Hope offered. "You don't have to make a decision right now," George clarified, noticing my unease. "I just wanted to introduce myself and explain the options you have." He told me about shared apartments for seniors, small studios with subsidized rent, public assistance for women in my situation. Information I didn't even know existed, resources I never imagined I might need. "Think about it," he said as we said goodbye. "When you're ready, I'll be here." That night, lying in bed, I reflected on everything that had happened in the past few months. The pain was still there, of course. The wound of my children's abandonment wouldn't heal easily, but it was no longer the center of my existence. I had found a job, made friends, discovered strengths I didn't know I had. Was I ready to take the next step, to live alone again? The answer came in the form of a memory. The night my children kicked me out. The feeling of having no control over my own life, of being at the mercy of others' decisions. I never wanted to feel that way again. The next morning I looked for George. "I want to try it," I told him without preamble. "I want my own place." George smiled as if he had been expecting that answer. "All right, let's get to work." The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Between work at the hotel and looking for housing, I barely had time to think. George showed me several options, all within my financial means, but none completely convinced me. Until one day, he showed me a small apartment in an old but well-maintained building, not far from the hotel where I worked. It was modest, a bedroom, a bathroom, a kitchen dining area, but it had natural light, a small balcony where a couple of potted plants would fit, and most importantly, I could afford it with my salary. "I like it," I said simply. George nodded, satisfied. "Then let's do the paperwork." Moving day was emotional. The women at the center had organized a small farewell party for me. There were tears, hugs, promises to stay in touch. "It's not goodbye," Eleanor assured me. "You'll always be part of New Hope." Eleanor gave me a plant for my balcony, to remind you that you can always grow, no matter where you're planted. My belongings fit into 2 bags, the suitcase I had arrived with that fateful night, plus a few things I had acquired, clothes, books, small treasures found at flea markets. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And the apartment, although rented, would also be mine. My space, my refuge, my new beginning. When George left me in front of the door with the keys in my hand, I felt a lump in my throat. "Nervous?" he asked kindly. "A little," I admitted, but also excited. "It's normal. New beginnings are always a little scary." He gave me one last piece of advice before leaving. "Don't isolate yourself, Evelyn. Stay in touch with your friends. From the center. Build a support network." I nodded, knowing he was right. This time I wouldn't be completely alone. When he left, I stood in front of the closed door for a moment, taking a deep breath. Then I put the key in the lock and turned. The click of the door opening sounded like a promise, like the beginning of something new. I went in and left the bags on the floor. The apartment smelled of fresh paint and cleanliness, the bare walls, the empty corners waiting to be filled with new memories. I went to the small window in the living room and looked out at the street. Life went on out there, oblivious to my personal tragedies and triumphs. People walking quickly, children playing, elderly people basking in the sun on benches. For the first time in a long time, I felt part of that flow of life, not a passive observer, a new beginning, I murmured to myself. And as the afternoon sun bathed my new home in golden light, I felt something bloom inside me. It wasn't happiness. Not exactly. It was something deeper, more lasting. Hope. Block 3. The first night in my new apartment was strangely silent. After months of sharing a room at the center, the absolute silence felt almost unsettling. I missed Adele's soft snoring, Sophia's movements in the next bed, even the nighttime noises of the center. Occasional footsteps, the distant murmur of the television in the common room. Here there was only me and my thoughts, and the silence. That silence that seemed to amplify every memory, every doubt, every fear. I went to bed early, exhausted from the move and the day's emotions. But sleep wouldn't come. I tossed and turned in bed, listening to the sounds of the building. The occasional elevator, footsteps on the floor above, the distant hum of traffic. Finally, I got up and went to the window. The city glowed under the streetlights, a sea of flickering lights in the darkness. Somewhere out there was my old house, where my children now lived without me. Would they ever think of me? Would they wonder where I was, if I was all right? Sadness threatened to drown me again, but I took a deep breath, remembering Eleanor's words. Don't look back. You can't change the past, but the future is waiting for you. I went back to bed with that thought in mind, and surprisingly, fell asleep almost instantly. The next morning brought a new feeling. Waking up in my own space, without imposed schedules, without the bustle of the dining room, without having to share the bathroom. Small luxuries I had taken for granted before, and now appreciated enormously. I made coffee exactly the way I liked it, strong and black, and sat by the window to enjoy it, watching the neighborhood wake up. A sense of peace invaded me, a moment of pure satisfaction that contrasted brutally with the despair I had felt that night. My children kicked me out. That day I had an afternoon shift at the hotel, so I spent the morning settling my few belongings into the apartment. I didn't have much to fill it with, but George had helped me get basic furniture through a non-profit organization. A bed, a table with 2 chairs, a small sofa, a dresser. As I organized my clothes in the dresser, my phone rang. It was Eleanor. "How was the first night in your new palace?" she asked with that humor of hers that had helped me so much in difficult times. "Strange," I admitted. "Too quiet." "You'll get used to it," she assured me. "And when you do, you'll love it. Nothing like closing your own door and knowing no one's going to bother you." We talked for a while longer. She told me she was also looking for her own place, that she had been saving and would be making the move soon. Her enthusiasm was contagious. "We have to celebrate when you find something," I told her. "I'll invite you over for dinner." The words came out naturally, but they surprised me. My place. It had been so long since I had said those words. "It would be my pleasure," Eleanor replied. "Just don't forget I'm vegetarian." I laughed, promising her a vegetable feast, and we hung up. The conversation had lifted my spirits. I continued organizing my things, and before I knew it, it was time to get ready for work. The hotel was about a 20-minute walk away, a pleasant stroll that helped clear my head before and after work. On the way, I passed a small nursery. I remembered Eleanor's gift, the plant I had already placed on my balcony, and felt the urge to buy another. I had never had plants before beyond a few hardy cacti. My husband always said they were an unnecessary expense, and after his death, with 3 children to raise and house to maintain, it had never seemed like a priority. But now it was different. I went in and bought a small lavender plant, drawn to its scent and purple flowers. It didn't cost much and gave me a strange satisfaction. "For my balcony," I told the clerk as I paid. "It's perfect for outdoors," she assured me. "Just needs sun and not too much water." I left with my purchase, feeling a small joy, a purpose. Something as simple as a plant to care for gave me one more reason to keep going. I arrived at the hotel with plenty of time and placed the lavender in the staff room, promising myself to pick it up on the way home. When I entered the kitchen, Sam was already there, prepping ingredients for the service. "Good afternoon, Evelyn," he greeted me with his usual efficiency. "We have a big group for dinner today. I'll need you to handle the salads and desserts." "No problem," I replied, putting on my apron. I liked working with Sam. He was demanding but fair, and above all, he treated me like a professional, not like an old woman who needed help. Here in the kitchen, my age didn't matter, only my ability to do my job well. The service went by with its usual intensity, the fast pace, the heat of the stoves, the orders coming in non-stop. There was no time to think about personal problems, only to focus on each dish, on each detail. And that was exactly what I needed, to lose myself in the work, to feel useful, that my hands could still create something good, something others appreciated. When the service ended and we cleaned the kitchen, Sam approached me with an expression I couldn't interpret. "Evelyn, can I talk to you for a moment before you leave?" My heart skipped a beat. Despite the months I had been working there, I still got nervous when the boss wanted to talk to me alone. "Of course," I replied, drying my hands on my apron. "I've been observing your work these past few weeks," he began, leaning against the counter. "You've improved a lot since you started." "Thank you," I murmured, not quite knowing where the conversation was going. "Mrs. Lewis and I have been talking," he continued. "We're going to expand the breakfast menu, include some more elaborate options, and we wanted to offer you the chance to take charge of that part." I was speechless. Not just recognition for my work, but new responsibility. A trust I didn't expect. "Me?" was all I could say. Sam smiled, amused by my surprise. "Yes, you. You have a knack for baking, and guests have commented on how good your omelets are. It would come with a small raise, of course." A raise? My own responsibility. Trust in my skills. Everything my children had taken from me by kicking me out of the house, by treating me like a useless burden, was now being offered to me here, in this modest hotel where I had come simply seeking to survive. "I'd love to," I replied sincerely. "Thank you for trusting me." Sam nodded, satisfied. "Perfect! We can start planning the new menu next week." I left the hotel with the lavender plant in my hands and a feeling of lightness in my chest. The walk back home seemed shorter, illuminated by that small personal victory. Upon entering my apartment, I placed the lavender next to the other plant on the balcony. The space was starting to have some life, some personality. Little by little, I was turning it into my home. I made a simple dinner and sat down to eat while watching a show on the small television George had gotten for me, a daily normality that would have seemed impossible months ago. Before bed, I checked my phone out of habit. I had a message from Eleanor, asking how everything was going at the apartment. I replied that it was fine, that I was adjusting. There was also a message from Eleanor sending me a photo of an apartment she had gone to see. "I think this could be it," her message said. I replied with enthusiasm and went to bed with a feeling of gratitude. It wasn't the life I had imagined having at 68, but it was a dignified life, a life of my own. Adjusting to living alone again wasn't easy. There were good days, like the one Sam had put me in charge of the breakfast menu. Days when I felt like I was moving forward, rebuilding my life on new foundations. But there were also bad days. Days when the silence of the apartment suffocated me, when memories returned like a dark tide, when loneliness weighed on me like a stone. On those days, I forced myself to go out, to walk around the neighborhood, to talk to a neighbor, to call Eleanor or Eleanor. I had learned that isolation only made things worse. One afternoon, returning from work, I stopped at a small cafe I had discovered in my neighborhood. It was a cozy place, with wooden tables and plants hanging from the ceiling. I used to go there for a cup of tea and read one of the books I borrowed from the center's library. I was engrossed in my reading when a male voice startled me. "Evelyn, is that you?" I looked up and saw a face that was vaguely familiar, although I couldn't place it. "Yes, it's me," I replied cautiously. The man smiled, and then I recognized him. It was Peter, an old colleague of my husband's. I hadn't seen him in years. So many that I couldn't even remember when the last time had been. "Peter," I said, remembering his name. "It's been a long time. An eternity." He nodded. "Can I sit down?" I hesitated for a moment. I wasn't used to socializing outside the center or the hotel. But something about his kind smile reassured me. "Of course." He sat across from me and ordered a coffee. His hair was completely white, but his eyes were still lively, an intense blue that contrasted with his tanned skin. "How are you, Evelyn? I haven't heard anything about you in years." I didn't know what to say, how to explain that my own children had kicked me out of the house, that I had lived in a support center, that I was rebuilding my life from scratch. It was too humiliating, too painful. "Fine," I replied vaguely. "And you? Still working?" Peter shook his head. "I retired 5 years ago. My wife passed away 2 years ago. So now I live alone, keeping busy as best I can. I have a small vegetable garden on the terrace. I volunteer at a soup kitchen on Tuesdays." "I'm sorry," I said sincerely. "About your wife, I mean." He nodded with a sad smile. "It was difficult at first, after 40 years together. But life goes on, doesn't it? Life goes on." A common phrase that used to seem like an empty cliché, but which I now understood in its full depth. "Yes," I replied. "Life goes on." We continued talking, remembering past times, catching up on edited versions of our lives. I didn't tell him the whole truth, but I didn't lie either. I told him about my job at the hotel, my small apartment, my plants on the balcony. He told me about his children, grown up now and living in other cities, his grandchildren whom he saw a few times a year, his daily routine as an active retiree. When it got late, Peter offered to walk me home. "It's not necessary," I replied, although I appreciated the gesture. "I insist," he said firmly. "Besides, it's on my way." We continued talking during the walk. There was something comforting about talking to someone who knew my former life, who had known Manuel, who remembered my children when they were small. When we reached my building entrance, Peter stopped. "It was a pleasure seeing you, Evelyn. Could we do it again sometime? Maybe grab another coffee?" The proposal caught me by surprise. Was he asking me out? Me at 68? "Sure," I replied, trying to sound casual. "I'd like that." We exchanged numbers and said goodbye. As I went up in the elevator, I felt a strange mix of emotions. It wasn't romantic attraction exactly. I wasn't even sure that was Peter's intention. It was more the feeling that new things could still happen in my life, that possibilities weren't closed off. That night I slept with a smile on my face, thinking that perhaps, just perhaps, life had more surprises in store for me. The following days were particularly intense at work. Sam and I worked together on the breakfast menu, experimenting with recipes, calculating costs, planning presentations. It was creative work that required concentration and filled me with satisfaction. One Friday afternoon, as I was finishing my shift, I received a message from Peter. "Fancy coffee tomorrow?" I replied yes, feeling a tingle of anticipation I hadn't experienced in years. We met at the same cafe where we had first bumped into each other, mid-morning. When I arrived, Peter was already there, sitting at a table by the window. He was wearing a light blue shirt that matched his eyes and had a book open in front of him. "I hope I didn't keep you waiting," I said by way of greeting. He looked up and smiled when he saw me. "I just got here," he replied, standing up to help me with my chair. An old-fashioned gesture I appreciated. We ordered coffee and pastries, and the conversation flowed naturally. He told me more about his volunteer work, the books he was reading, a trip he was planning to the coast the following month. I told him about my new project at the hotel, how I was slowly decorating my apartment, the computer classes I was taking at the neighborhood community center. I didn't mention my recent past, the night my children kicked me out, the shelter, and he didn't ask. It was as if we had both tacitly decided to focus on the present and the future, not on the wounds of the past. After coffee, Peter suggested taking a walk in the nearby park. The day was sunny but not too hot, perfect for a walk. "You know, I'm glad I ran into you, Evelyn," he said as we walked under the trees. "Loneliness at our age. It's not easy." "No, it's not," I admitted. "When Martha died, I thought I would never feel good again, that the rest of my life would just be waiting for the end." I looked at him, surprised by his honesty. "And you don't think that anymore?" He shook his head. "No. Now I know I can still enjoy life, the little things. A good book, coffee with someone nice, the sun on my face on a day like today." His words resonated with me. I too was learning to appreciate those small daily joys, to find beauty in the simple, to appreciate the freedom to decide about my own life. "I understand what you're saying," I replied. "I'm also learning to live, again." He looked at me with curiosity but didn't probe further, respecting my silences. We continued walking, talking about everything and nothing, enjoying each other's company without expectations or pressures. When we said goodbye, we made plans to see each other again the following week. I went home with a feeling of warmth in my chest. It wasn't romantic love. It was too soon, and we both carried too many scars for that. It was something simpler and, at the same time, deeper. Human connection, mutual understanding, the possibility of a friendship that could become something more with time. That night, as I watered my plants on the balcony, I looked up at the starry sky and allowed myself something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, not just to survive, but to live fully, with dignity and joy, the years I had left. The following week was especially intense at work. We were implementing the new breakfast menu, and it was all adjustments, corrections, adaptations. I came home, exhausted but satisfied, with the feeling of creating something valuable. On Friday, as I was finishing my shift, Sam approached me with a serious expression. "Evelyn, Mrs. Lewis wants to talk to you before you leave." My heart skipped a beat. Was there a problem with the new menu? Were they unhappy with my work? Mrs. Lewis received me in her small office next to the reception. She was a woman around 60, elegant and with exquisite manners, who rarely showed herself in the kitchen. "Please, sit down, Evelyn," she indicated with a kind gesture. I obeyed, trying to hide my nervousness. "Sam has been keeping me informed about the new breakfast menu," she began. "He says you've done an excellent job." I breathed a sigh of relief. It wasn't a reprimand. "Thank you, madam. We're putting all our effort into it." "It shows," she nodded. "Guests have started commenting on it in satisfaction surveys. They specifically mention the quality of the breakfast." A feeling of pride washed over me. My work was being recognized, valued. "I'm happy to hear that," I replied sincerely. "You see, Evelyn, I called you because I wanted to propose something," Mrs. Lewis continued, clasping her hands on the desk. "We're thinking of expanding our services, offering menus for small events, business meetings, family celebrations, and I'd like you to be in charge of that." I was speechless. A promotion? More responsibility? At 68? Me, was all I could say, repeating my reaction from weeks ago with Sam. Mrs. Lewis smiled. "Yes, you. You have experience, good culinary taste, and most importantly, customers are delighted with your creations." It was more than I could have dreamed of. Not just keeping my job, but growing in it, developing professionally at an age when most people were already retired or relegated to lesser tasks. "It would be an honor," I replied, feeling my eyes well up. "Thank you for trusting me." "Don't thank me," she replied simply. "You've earned it with your work. Talk to Sam next week to start planning." I left the office floating, barely aware of my steps. In less than a year, I had gone from being a homeless woman, abandoned by her children, to having a job that valued my skills, a promotion, a professional future. I called Eleanor as soon as I got home. I needed to share the news with someone who understood what it meant to me. "That's fantastic, Evelyn," she exclaimed after listening to me. "See? I told you you were capable of much more than you thought." Her enthusiasm was contagious. We talked for a while longer, and before hanging up, she gave me more news. "By the way, I found an apartment. I'm moving next week." "Eleanor, that's wonderful." I was genuinely happy for her. "We have to celebrate." "Definitely," she agreed. "Dinner at your place, as you promised, and I'll bring the wine." When I hung up, I stood looking at my apartment. In just a few months, I had gone from having nothing to having a home, a job I was passionate about, true friendships, even the possibility of something more with Peter. It was as if life was giving me a second chance, and this time, I was determined to make the most of it. The following Saturday, Peter and I went to the movies. It was a French film, a bittersweet comedy about two elderly people who met in a retirement home and rediscovered love. The choice didn't seem accidental. During the movie, our hands brushed several times on the shared armrest, an innocent gesture that transported me back to my adolescence, to the first nervous jitters, to the butterflies in my stomach I thought were forgotten forever. After the movie, we went to dinner at a small Italian restaurant. Under the soft candlelight, with a glass of red wine, Peter seemed more attractive than ever. It wasn't just his physical appearance. It was the way he looked at me, listened to me, made me feel valued and desired despite my wrinkles, my worn hands, my gray hair. "Evelyn," he said at one point during dinner, taking my hand across the table. "I don't know if it's too soon to say this, but I like you. I like being with you." Unexpected warmth rose to my cheeks. It had been so long since anyone had said something like that to me. I like you too, Peter, I admitted, surprising myself with my sincerity. I like the person I am when I'm with you. His smile lit up his face, making him look years younger. Do you think we could try something at our age? The question hung between us, loaded with possibilities and also with fears. We both carried heavy baggage. He, the loss of his wife after 4 decades together. I, the abandonment by my children, the trauma of becoming homeless, the hard battle to regain my dignity. I don't know if it will work, I replied honestly, but I think it's worth trying. He squeezed my hand with a tenderness that touched my soul. Step by step, he proposed. No rush, getting to know each other, enjoying the journey. Step by step, I agreed. The rest of the dinner passed in an atmosphere of renewed connection. We talked about our tastes, our postponed dreams, the places we would like to visit, the things we wanted to do before it was too late. When he walked me home, we stopped at the door. The moment of the first kiss hung in the air, filled with expectation and nervousness. Peter leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull back if I wished. But I didn't. His lips brushed mine softly, a light and sweet kiss that lasted just a few seconds but awakened sensations I thought were lost forever. Good night, Evelyn, he whispered against my lips. Good night, Peter, I replied, my heart pounding like a teenager's. I went into my apartment and closed the door, leaning against it with a silly smile on my face. At 68, I had just relived the magic of a first kiss, the hope of a new love. Life, definitely, never stopped surprising me. Block 4. The following days passed in a kind of luminous haze. My job at the hotel, which I was already passionate about, took on a new shine with the event menu project. I met regularly with Sam to plan, experiment with recipes, adjust budgets. And there were the afternoons with Peter. Sometimes we went to the movies, other times we walked in the park or simply sat in a cafe and talked for hours. Little by little, I opened up, telling him parts of my story that I had kept secret. I told him about the night my children kicked me out of the house, the shelter, how I had had to rebuild my life from scratch. I feared his reaction, that he would look at me with pity or worse, judge me in some way. But Peter surprised me. He listened in silence, holding my hand when tears threatened to overflow, nodding with understanding, not interrupting until I had finished my story. Evelyn, he said finally, what your children did to you is unforgivable, but what you have done since, rebuilding yourself, finding strength where others would have given up, that is admirable. His words were like a balm for my wounded soul. He didn't see me as a pathetic victim or a burden, but as a survivor, as someone worthy of admiration. Sometimes I still wonder what I did wrong, I confessed. Why didn't my own children want me in their lives? Peter shook his head. I don't think it's about what you did wrong, Evelyn. People sometimes make selfish decisions that have nothing to do with others, but with their own insecurities or ambitions. He was right, of course, but still, it was hard not to feel partly responsible. Have you tried contacting them since then? He asked gently. No, I admitted. I wouldn't know what to say to them. And I'm scared. Scared of their rejection, of them hurting me again. Peter nodded, understanding. It's normal to be scared, but maybe someday, when you feel ready. He left the sentence hanging in the air without pressuring me. And I was grateful. I wasn't ready to face my children, to expose my vulnerable heart to rejection again. For now, what I was building was enough. My job, my home, my friendships, and this new feeling for Peter that grew day by day. One afternoon, while we were preparing dinner together in my small apartment, another first at my age, cooking with a man who wasn't my late husband, Peter proposed something unexpected. "I've been thinking," he began, as he chopped vegetables for the salad. "My niece has a house by the beach, about 2 hours from here. She lets me use it some weekends. Would you like to come with me next weekend?" I stopped in the middle of preparing the sauce, surprised by the proposal. A weekend together. It was a significant step in our relationship, one I hadn't anticipated so soon. "You don't have to answer now," he added quickly, noticing my hesitation. "And if you don't feel comfortable, I'll perfectly understand." I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "It's not that I don't want to, Peter. It's just that it's been so long since I've been in a relationship, since I've shared that kind of intimacy with anyone. I felt ridiculous expressing those insecurities at my age. But Peter put down the knife, walked over to me, and took my hands in his. "Evelyn, the last thing I want is to pressure you. We can go as slowly as you need. The house has 2 bedrooms," he added with a reassuring smile. "No expectations." His understanding moved me. He wasn't trying to rush anything. He just wanted to spend more time with me, get to know each other better, in a different setting. "I'd love to go with you," I finally replied, and I was rewarded with a smile that lit up his entire face. The weekend at the beach was magical. Peter's niece's house was a small cabin a few feet from the sea, with a wooden porch where we spent hours reading, talking, or simply gazing at the horizon. We walked along the shore barefoot, feeling the sand between our toes like children. We collected shells and stones polished by the sea. We cooked fresh fish bought from local fishermen together. We watched dreamy sunsets, and although we had separate rooms, as he had promised, on the second night, Peter kissed me on the porch, under the moonlight. A deep, passionate kiss that awakened sensations I thought were forgotten. "Evelyn," he whispered against my lips, "I'm falling in love with you." The words, simple and direct, took my breath away. Love at our age? Was it possible to feel that emotion again, after so many years, after so many disappointments? "I feel something very strong for you too," I admitted, unable to say the word. Love yet, although I felt it forming in my heart. That night I returned to my room with the memory of his kisses burning on my lips and a feeling of renewed youth. Nothing else happened between us, but the promise was there, floating in the air like a sweet and tempting possibility. The weekend ended too soon, and we returned to the city with the certainty that something had changed between us. We were no longer just 2 people enjoying each other's company. We were 2 souls who had found comfort and joy in each other, who were building something new and beautiful together. The following week, an unexpected surprise arrived in my life. I was at work, finishing preparing a menu for a small corporate event, when Laura, the human resources manager, came to find me. "Evelyn, someone is asking for you at reception." My heart skipped a beat. Peter? It couldn't be. He knew I was working and would never interrupt me. Eleanor, perhaps. Or Eleanor. I left the kitchen and went to reception, drying my hands on my apron. And then I saw her. Lisa, my daughter, was standing by the counter looking nervous. She had lost weight since I last saw her and had deep circles under her eyes. I stopped dead in my tracks, feeling as if the air had left my lungs. After so long, after the way they had kicked me out of the house, my daughter was here. Why? What did she want from me? "Mom," she said when she saw me, in a small voice I didn't recognize as hers. I didn't answer. I couldn't. A whirlwind of emotions paralyzed me. Pain, anger, confusion, and a treacherous longing to hug her, to forgive everything. "Can we talk?" she asked, taking a step towards me. "Please." I looked around. The hotel lobby was not the place for this conversation, whatever its purpose. "I'm working," I finally replied, in a voice that sounded strange even to me. "I get off at 2. "I'll wait," she said, and there was a determination in her voice that reminded me of myself. I nodded briefly and returned to the kitchen, trembling slightly. Sam noticed my distress immediately. "Are you okay, Evelyn? You're pale." "My daughter is here," I replied, feeling the words burn my throat. "My daughter, the one who kicked me out of the house." Sam looked at me with concern. "Do you want to take the rest of the day off?" I shook my head. Work was the only thing that would keep me sane until it was time to face Lisa. "No, I'm fine. I need to finish the menu." He didn't insist, but he watched me closely the rest of the morning, stepping in when my hands trembled too much or I forgot a step in the recipe. When it was finally time to leave, I changed my clothes and went to the lobby. Lisa was still there, sitting in one of the armchairs, staring at her phone. When she saw me, she immediately stood up. "There's a coffee shop on the corner," I said without greeting her. I needed neutral ground for this conversation. I didn't want to take her to my apartment, to my new sanctuary. We walked in silence to the coffee shop. I didn't try to start a conversation, and neither did she. There was too much between us, too many unspoken words, too much pain. We sat at a secluded table. We ordered coffee, more as an excuse to delay the inevitable conversation than from a desire to drink it. "You look good, Mom," Lisa said finally, breaking the awkward silence. "I'm fine," I replied dryly. "What do you want, Lisa?" My tone made her visibly flinch. The Lisa I remembered, the one who had participated in kicking me out of my own home, wouldn't have been intimidated so easily. There was a change in her, a new fragility I didn't quite understand. "I wanted to see you," she replied in a low voice, "to know how you were." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Now you care how I am? After throwing me out on the street without caring where I would sleep?" Her eyes filled with tears, but I felt no compassion. I had cried too many nights, had felt too much pain because of her. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I know it's not enough, but I really am sorry." "Why now, Lisa? Why after so long?" She took a deep breath, as if gathering strength. "Things haven't been good since that night," she began. "Robert and Tamara separated. He had to sell the house because he couldn't afford it on his own. Tom lost his job." I interrupted, her unable to contain my indignation. "Have you come to tell me about your misfortunes after what you did to me?" No, she quickly denied. "It's not that. It's just that everything has fallen apart. And we realized too late how unfair we were to you." I remained silent, watching her. She seemed genuinely regretful, but a part of me wondered if that regret would have existed if things had gone well for them. "How did you find me?" I finally asked. "It wasn't easy," she admitted. "We looked for you for months. No one knew where you were. Finally, a neighbor told us she had seen you working at this hotel. So they had looked for me." The idea surprised me, although I didn't know whether to feel comforted or even more hurt. If they had looked for me, it was because at some point they had realized how terrible their actions were. "What do you want from me, Lisa?" I repeated my initial question. Have you come to ease your conscience? To ask me to come back? She shook her head. I've come to ask for your forgiveness, Mom. And to tell you that, if someday you want to see us again, to have some kind of relationship with us, we'll be waiting. Her words caught me off guard. It wasn't what I expected. I had imagined they would ask me to come back, that they would need something from me. Not this seemingly sincere and unconditional repentance. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said honestly. What you did to me, it destroyed me. I had to rebuild my life from scratch, alone, at my age. I know, she said with a broken voice. And I'm not asking you to forget it, or even to forgive us now, just to know that we are here, that we recognize our mistake, that we miss you. The last words were barely a whisper, but they hit me with the force of a tsunami. We miss you. 3 syllables that awakened a flood of contradictory emotions in me. Anxiety, anger, longing, sadness. We remained silent, the coffee growing cold. Between us, the noise of the coffee shop as a backdrop to our personal drama. I need time, I finally said. I can't decide now if I want to have contact with you again. I've built a new life. I have a job I like, friends who value me. I don't know if I'm ready to open that door again. Lisa nodded, understanding. I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll leave you my number, she said, writing it on a napkin. When you're ready, if you ever are. I took the napkin mechanically, not knowing if I would ever dial that number. We said goodbye with a painful formality, so far from the hugs and kisses we once exchanged without thinking. As I watched her walk away, I felt a lump in my throat. She was my daughter, the same one I had rocked as a baby, taught to read, comforted through her first heartbreaks. And now we were 2 strangers united by blood and a deep wound that perhaps would never fully heal. I returned to my apartment with my mind in turmoil. Lisa's visit had stirred up everything I thought I had overcome, or at least accepted. The pain, the anger, the feeling of abandonment, but also something more, the possibility of reconciliation, however remote. I didn't know what to do with that possibility. I wasn't sure I wanted to explore it. The risk of being hurt again was too great. That night I called Peter and told him about the encounter with Lisa. He listened in silence, without interrupting me, giving me the space I needed to sort through my thoughts and emotions. What do you think you should do? He asked when I finished my story. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to believe in their repentance, get my children back, but another part is so scared of being hurt again, of them only looking for me because things are going badly for them. It's normal to be scared, he said softly. What they did to you was terrible. No one would expect you to forgive them easily. What would you do if you were me? I asked him, genuinely interested in his perspective. He thought for a moment before answering. I can't tell you what to do, Evelyn. It's your family, your pain. But I think, whatever your decision, you should make it from a position of strength, not need. You are no longer the woman they kicked out onto the street. You are a woman who has rebuilt herself, who has self-worth. Always remember that. His words resonated with me powerfully. He was right. I was no longer that vulnerable and desperate woman from the night they kicked me out. Now I had options, the power to decide about my life. Thank you, Peter, I said sincerely. I needed to hear that. I spent the following days reflecting on Lisa's visit, weighing my feelings, trying to Imagine what it would be like to have contact with my children again. Could I trust them again? Would I want to? I couldn't find clear answers, only more questions. At work, Sam noticed my distraction. "Still thinking about your daughter?" he asked me one afternoon, while we were preparing a banquet for an event. "I can't help it," I admitted. "It's complicated." "Family always is." He nodded wisely. "But remember, Evelyn, now you decide. You can set your own terms, your own conditions. You don't have to accept anything that doesn't feel right." His words gave me a new perspective. Until then, I had been thinking in terms of all or nothing. Forgive completely and return to the previous relationship, or cut off all contact forever. But there was a middle ground, a path where I could set boundaries, where I could protect my heart while exploring the possibility of reconciliation. That night, after much reflection, I made a decision. I wouldn't call Lisa, at least not for now. I needed more time, more space to process everything that had happened. But I would keep her number, leave that door ajar, as a future possibility. For now, I would focus on what I had built: my job, my relationship with Peter, my friendships, my new life. And from that strength, someday, perhaps I would be ready to face the past without it destroying me again. Time passed, and life went on. The event menu project at the hotel was a resounding success. Mrs. Lewis was so satisfied that she offered me a small raise and more responsibilities. My relationship with Peter also flourished. We saw each other almost daily, shared hobbies, discovered together small, everyday pleasures that we had forgotten or never experienced. One night after dinner, at my apartment, Peter made me a proposal I didn't expect. "Evelyn," he began, taking my hands in his. "I've been thinking a lot lately. About us, about the future." My heart sped up. What was he getting at? And I encouraged him to continue. "We're older. We've lived our lives. We've had our previous, partners. It doesn't make sense for us to keep walking on eggshells, as if we had all the time in the world." I took a deep breath, anticipating what was coming next. "What exactly are you proposing?" "That we live together," he said directly. "My apartment is bigger than yours, but we could look for another one if you prefer neutral ground. Or even, we could get married if you wanted to." The proposal left me speechless. Living together, getting married. Concepts that seemed to belong to another life, to a younger Evelyn, who no longer existed. "I don't know what to say, Peter," I finally admitted. "It's a big decision." "You don't have to answer now," he assured me. "Think about it. Talk to your friends if you want, sleep on it. I'll be here, waiting." That night, after Peter had left, I sat on the balcony with a cup of tea, gazing at the stars. Was I ready to take that step, to share my life with someone again after everything I had been through? The answer came with surprising clarity. Yes, Peter made me happy. He respected me. He valued my independence. He wasn't a savior, and I wasn't a damsel in distress. We were two mature people who had found companionship and mutual love at a stage of life where we both already knew who we were and what we wanted. The next day, when he came to visit me after work, I had my answer ready. "I've thought about your proposal," I began as we sat on the sofa. "And?" he asked, with a mix of anticipation and nervousness. "I want to live with you," I replied directly. "But I don't want to get married. At least not for now. I've spent too long defining myself through others. Wife, mother. Now that I'm finally myself, I want to maintain that independence, even if I share my life with you." His smile was all I needed to see to know that he had understood. "That's perfectly fine with me," he said, hugging me. "The important thing is being together. How we do it matters less." That night, for the first time, we made love as a couple. Despite my age, my insecurities about my aging body, Peter made me feel desired, beautiful, alive. It was a tender encounter, sometimes clumsy, full of laughter and mutual discoveries. And afterwards, curled up under the covers, I felt a peace I thought was lost forever. "You know," Peter murmured, stroking my gray hair, "it's never too late to be happy." And in that moment, I knew he was right. It's never too late as long as there is life, as long as there is courage to try one more time. We started planning our move. We decided to look for a new place, an apartment that would be ours from the start, where we could create memories together. In the midst of these plans, one afternoon after work, I found Robert, my oldest son, waiting for me at the hotel entrance. The impact was even greater than with Lisa. Robert had been the harshest that night, the one who had insisted I leave, the one who had closed the door behind me without a word of comfort. "Mom," he said when he saw me, his voice deeper and more tired than I remembered. I stopped dead in my tracks, unsure how to react. Part of me wanted to turn around and ignore him. Another wanted to scream at him all the pain he had caused me. And another, treacherous part, wanted to hug him like when he was a child. "Robert," I finally replied with studied neutrality. "Lisa told you where to find me, I suppose." He nodded, uncomfortable. "I needed to see you, to talk to you." I observed him closely. He had aged since I last saw him. New gray hairs, deeper, lines around his eyes, an air of defeat I didn't remember in him. "Why now?" I asked directly. I had no patience for beating around the bush, because I've been wrong my whole life. He replied with a frankness that surprised me. "Because I need to ask for your forgiveness, even though I know I don't deserve it." His sincerity disarmed me momentarily. I didn't expect such an admission. "Let's go somewhere to talk," I suggested, not wanting to have this conversation on the street. We walked to a small park nearby and sat on a bench. Robert seemed nervous, fidgeting with his hands, avoiding looking directly at me. "I'm listening," I said, when the silence became too heavy. He took a deep breath before starting. "What we did to you, what I did to you, is unforgivable, I know. I was cruel, selfish, inhumane." I remained silent, letting him continue. "After you left, things started to fall apart. My marriage, which was already bad, got worse. Tamara left, taking the children. The house became too big, too empty." "Have you come to tell me about your problems?" I interrupted, feeling anger bubble up inside me again. "No," he quickly denied. "I've come to tell you that I understand what I put you through, that I've experienced firsthand what it's like to be alone, without an emotional home. Although I can't even imagine what it was like for you, at your age, with no resources." His words resonated with me more deeply than I wanted to admit. He had suffered, yes, but he had also learned from that suffering. Could it be that my son was going through a similar process? "Where do you live now?" I asked, more out of curiosity than genuine interest. "I rent a small apartment. I see the children on weekends when Tamara allows me." The irony was not lost on me. He, who had kicked me out of my house, now lived in a rented apartment, seeing his children when his ex-wife allowed him. "Life has curious ways of teaching us lessons," I commented, unable to resist a certain bitter satisfaction. Robert nodded, accepting the implied reproach. "I deserve it, Mom," I deserve your anger, your contempt. I don't hold contempt for you, Robert. I interrupted him. You are my son. I carried you in my womb. I raised you. I loved you more than my own life. That's why what you did hurt me so much. Not because it was cruel, but because it came from you. From the one I least expected it from. His eyes filled with tears, something I hadn't seen since he was a child. Robert had always been the strong one, the stoic one, the one who didn't show weakness. I'm so sorry, he murmured. I would give anything to go back and change what I did, but you can't, I replied softly. What's done is done. And in a way, it was the best thing that could have happened to me. He looked at me in surprise. The best? Yes, I affirmed with conviction, because it forced me to stand on my own. 2 feet, to discover that I could. I've built a new life, Robert. I have a job I'm passionate about, friends who value me. Even, I hesitated for a moment, but decided to continue. Even found love again. His expression changed from surprise to something akin to respect. You're incredible, Mom. He finally said. You always were, but I didn't know how to see it. The compliment, sincere and heartfelt, softened something inside me. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But perhaps it was the beginning of a path towards reconciliation. What do you want from me now, Robert? I asked, getting straight to the point. Just a chance, he replied without hesitation. A chance to show you that I've changed, to be a part of your life again, on your terms, however you want. His words resonated with me, especially on your terms. It was what Sam had advised me. Set my own terms, my own boundaries. I need time, I finally said. All of this is very recent, very unexpected. I understand, he nodded. I'll leave you my number. Call me when you're ready, if you ever are. We said goodbye with a formal handshake that turned, unexpectedly, into a brief hug. It wasn't the warm, unconditional hug from before, but something tentative, loaded with contradictory emotions. But it was contact, a bridge over the chasm that had opened between us. That night, while having dinner with Peter and telling him about the encounter with Robert, I realized something important. I no longer felt the same devastating anger, the same paralyzing pain. I hadn't forgiven. Not completely, but I had begun to heal. Do you think you should give them a chance? Peter asked after listening carefully. I don't know, I replied honestly. Part of me wants to. They're my children after all. But another part is afraid of getting hurt again. Peter took my hand across the table. Whatever your decision, I'll be by your side. And remember, now you have the power to decide what that relationship will be like, if you decide to have one. You can set boundaries, conditions, protect yourself, but don't close yourself off to the possibility of reconciliation if that's what you truly want. His words gave me clarity. He was right. I was no longer the helpless victim, the abandoned mother. I was a strong woman, with my own resources, with a support network. I could afford to explore the possibility of reconciliation from a position of strength, not need. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions and activities. Between work, preparing to move in with Peter, and continuously reflecting on my children, I barely had time to breathe. Until one afternoon, while organizing my few belongings for the move, I found something I had forgotten. The family photo I had packed in the suitcase that fateful night. It was a picture from happier times, my 3 children still small, their father and I, smiling at the camera during a beach vacation. I looked at the smiling faces, so different from the adults who had kicked me out of the house. So different also from the regretful men and women who now sought my forgiveness. And then I made my decision. I would call them, all three. I would give them a chance, but on my own terms. I would not be the self-sacrificing mother who gave everything and asked for nothing again. I would be a woman offering reconciliation, conditioned on mutual respect, dignity, equality. I didn't know if it would work, if we could rebuild something of what we had lost. But I was willing to try, not for them, but for myself. Because forgiveness, when it comes from strength and not from need, is also an act of self-liberation. That night, after talking to Peter about my decision, I dialed Lisa's number. "Mom?" She answered on the second ring, her voice tinged with hope and nervousness. "Yes, it's me," I confirmed. "I've been thinking, Lisa, about what you and Robert told me, about the possibility of having contact again." There was an expectant silence on the other end of the line. "And I've decided that I'm willing to try," I continued. "But with conditions. I'm not the same woman you kicked out of the house. I will not be treated like a burden, like someone disposable. Again." "Of course," she replied with a trembling voice. "Whatever you say, Mom. I want to see all three of you together," I proposed, "including Tom. This Sunday, if you can. I'll introduce you to someone important to me, and we'll talk about what this reconciliation could be like." "Sunday? Yes, of course. I'll tell the guys. We'll be there wherever you say." I told her a restaurant near my apartment, neutral ground where I would feel comfortable, but which wouldn't reveal too much of my private life. "One more thing, Lisa," I added before hanging up. "I'm not alone in this. I have people who love and protect me. If this is some kind of trick or if you hurt me again." "It's not, Mom," she interrupted me fervently. "I promise. We just want a chance to show you that we've changed." "I hope so," I replied, "because I have changed, and I won't allow myself to be hurt again." Block 5 Sunday arrived with a mix of anxiety and determination. Peter and I got ready together in my apartment. He seemed almost as nervous as I was, although he tried to hide it with that calmness of his that comforted me so much. "Are you sure about this?" he asked as he helped me put on the necklace, a gift from him for our 3 months together. "No," I admitted honestly. "But I need to do it. For me, not for them." "I'll be by your side every step of the way," he promised, kissing my cheek, and I knew it was true. Peter was not just my partner. He was my shield, my support, my anchor in the midst of the emotional storm that was brewing. We arrived at the restaurant with plenty of time. I had chosen a pleasant but not too intimate place, with spaced tables that allowed for private conversations. We asked for a table for 5 and waited holding hands under the tablecloth. I saw them arrive together, my 3 children. Robert, serious and formal as always, but with a new air of humility. Lisa, nervous, wringing her hands. And Tom, my youngest, whom I hadn't seen since that night, with an unreadable expression on his face. They stopped when they saw us, clearly surprised by Peter's presence. For an endless second, we looked at each other across the space that separated us, loaded with memories, pain, and possibilities. Finally, they approached. The greetings were tense, formal. I introduced Peter as my partner, secretly enjoying the surprise on their faces. They had never imagined me capable of rebuilding my love life at my age. Once everyone was seated, an awkward silence settled. At the table, No one seemed to know how to start this difficult conversation. "Thank you for coming," I finally said, taking the initiative. "I've thought a lot about what you told me, Lisa and Robert, about your willingness to reconnect, about your repentance." The three of them looked at me with an almost painful intensity, as if they feared I would get up and leave at any moment. "What you did to me," I continued, keeping my voice steady despite the lump in my throat, "was the most painful thing I have ever experienced in my life. You destroyed me. You took away my home, my identity, my security, everything." They lowered their gaze, unable to meet mine. Tom, who had remained silent, seemed about to cry. "But you also gave me, unintentionally, the opportunity to discover my own strength, to build a new life on my terms, to find people who value me for who I am, not just for what I can give." Peter squeezed my hand under the table, giving me strength. "I have decided that I am willing to try to rebuild our relationship," I declared, seeing their faces light up with hope. "But with clear conditions." They nodded, expectant. "First condition, absolute respect. I am not a burden. I am not a useless, old woman. I am a woman with a life of my own, with my own decisions, with dignity." "Of course, Mom," Robert stated, and the other two nodded vigorously. "Second condition, honesty. If this is just because things are going badly for you and you need something from me, tell me now and let's end this here." They looked at each other, surprised by my frankness. "It's not because of that," Lisa assured me. "It's because we miss you, because we realized our mistake too late, because you are our mother, and we love you." Her words sounded sincere, but I remained on guard. Words are easy. It's actions that reveal the truth. Third condition, patience. I don't expect everything to go back to how it was immediately. We all need time. Time to heal, to rebuild trust, to get to know each other again. "All the time you need, Mom," Tom said, speaking for the first time. His voice, deeper than I remembered, held a tremor of emotion. "And fourth condition?" I added, looking at Peter with a smile. "Respect for my new life, my decisions, the people who are now part of it." "It's a pleasure to meet you," Peter said, addressing my children with a cordiality I admired, given what he knew about them. "Your mother is an extraordinary woman." There was a moment of silence, and then, surprisingly, Robert extended his hand to Peter. "Thank you for being with her when we failed," he said with a sincerity I didn't expect from him. Peter shook his hand, and something in that gesture, in that mutual recognition, slightly eased the tension at the table. The meal proceeded in a less tense atmosphere, although still charged with contained emotions. My children told me more about their current lives, their difficulties, their small triumphs. I told them about my work at the hotel, how I had gotten there, omitting the most painful details of my time on the street, my plans to move in with Peter. When I mentioned that I had started as a kitchen assistant and was now in charge of the event menus, I saw something in their faces I didn't expect. Pride. A flicker of genuine admiration that took me by surprise. "You always cooked amazingly," Tom commented with a shy smile. "I remember your potato omelets on Sundays." "And your custard," Lisa added. "I've never tasted any better than yours." Small shared memories, fragments of a family life we once had, and that now seemed so distant, almost belonging to other people. At the end of the meal, when it was time to say goodbye, there was a moment of hesitation. How would we say goodbye? With a formal handshake? with kisses on the cheek like polite strangers. It was Tom who broke the impasse. My youngest son, the most sensitive, the one who had once been my favorite, approached me with tears in his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he murmured, and before I could respond, he hugged me. It was a clumsy, unsure hug, loaded with guilt and longing. My body initially tensed, an instinctive reaction of protection against the one who had hurt me. But then slowly, I raised my arms and returned the hug. It wasn't the warm, confident hug from before. It was a cautious hug, a trembling first step on a long and difficult path, but it was a beginning. The other two joined in, one by one. First Lisa, then, after a brief hesitation, Robert. An incomplete, imperfect family hug, but real. When we separated, everyone had teary eyes. Even Robert, always so controlled. No more words were needed. We had built a bridge over the abyss, fragile still, but with the possibility of strengthening it with time and joint effort. "I'll call you," I promised, feeling that for the first time in a long time I was the one in control of our relationship. They nodded, accepting my terms without protest. I was no longer the vulnerable mother they could kick out onto the street, but a strong woman offering them a second chance they didn't deserve, and they knew it. Peter and I walked away arm in arm, leaving them at the restaurant door. I could feel their eyes on my back as we walked. "I'm proud of you," Peter said as we turned the corner. "You showed incredible strength and dignity." "Thank you for being there," I replied, resting my head on his shoulder as we walked. "I couldn't have done it alone." "You could have," he affirmed with conviction. "But I'm glad you didn't have to." The following weeks brought significant changes in my life. Peter and I found a perfect apartment, bright, spacious, with a large balcony where all my plants and his would fit. The move was simple since neither of us had many possessions. But making that space our home was a beautiful experience. We bought furniture together, argued amicably about colors and decoration, blended our lives like two rivers naturally converging. The new apartment had 2 bedrooms, one for us, and another we turned into a shared space. His for his books and small desk where he wrote poetry as a hobby. Mine for my kitchen projects, where I experimented with recipes for the hotel. At work, things were going better and better. The events business grew, and with it my responsibility and salary. I was no longer just the lady who helped in the kitchen. I was Evelyn, the event chef, respected for her experience and creativity. And meanwhile, little by little, I was rebuilding the relationship with my children. We started with occasional phone calls, then individual coffees with each of them, and finally, monthly family lunches. It wasn't easy. There were moments of tension, of painful memories that surfaced in the middle of a casual conversation, of awkward silences. But there were also genuine laughs, confidences, small gestures of closeness. One afternoon, Robert called me with unexpected news. "Mom, remember I told you about the problems with Tamara regarding the children's visits?" "Yes, of course," I replied, remembering his frustrations. "Well, we've reached an agreement. I'll have them every other weekend. And I was wondering if you'd like to meet them. They're your grandchildren, after all, and they barely remember you." The proposal moved me more than I expected. My grandchildren, those little ones I had barely seen in recent years due to the estrangement with Robert. "I'd love to," I replied without hesitation. "When?" "This Saturday I'll have them. We could go to the park if you like. They love it, and it's a relaxed place to reconnect." "Perfect," I accepted, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness at the prospect of reconnecting with my grandchildren. When I hung up, I found myself crying silently. They weren't tears of sadness, but of a complex emotion I couldn't name. It was as if life was returning to me, piece by piece, what it had once taken away. But in a new way, different, perhaps even better. Peter found me like that and hugged me without asking, giving me space to process my emotions. When I finally told him about Robert's call, he smiled with genuine joy for me. "Life always finds a way, doesn't it?" he commented, kissing my forehead. And he was right. Despite all the storms, all the pain, life always finds a way to go on, to rebuild, to bloom in the most unexpected places. Saturday arrived with a clear sky and a gentle breeze, perfect for a day at the park. I dressed carefully, wanting to make a good impression without looking like I was trying too hard. I opted for comfortable pants, a colorful blouse, and a light cardigan. Peter watched me as I got ready, with that smile of his that always comforted me. "You look beautiful," he said, hugging me from behind as I looked in the mirror. "Your grandchildren are going to adore you." "I hope so," I replied, unable to avoid the nervousness. It's been so long. Children have an amazing ability to forgive and connect, he assured me. "Just be yourself." We met Robert at the park entrance. He arrived holding hands with two children, Martin, 8, and Sophia, 6. I vaguely remembered them from sporadic visits before the falling out, but they had grown so much they almost seemed like different people. "Kids," Robert said, kneeling down to their level. "Do you remember I told you about your Grandma Evelyn? Well, here she is." They looked at me with curiosity. Sophia partially hidden behind her father's leg, Martin with a concentrated frown, as if trying to place me in his memory. "Hello," I said simply, with a smile I hoped was reassuring. "Did you make chocolate chip cookies?" Martin suddenly asked, surprising me. "Yes," I replied, thrilled that he remembered me for something so simple but significant. "I used to make them when you came to visit." "I remember them," he stated seriously. "They were the best cookies in the world." The ice broke with that observation. Sophia, encouraged by her brother's reaction, came out from her hiding place and asked me if I still made cookies. When I assured her that I did, that I could make her some, her face lit up with a smile that reminded me so much of Robert when he was little that I felt a pang in my heart. We spent the afternoon in the park playing, talking, reconnecting. The children, free from the resentments and complications of adults, accepted me with that simplicity that only childhood allows. To them, I was simply the grandma who made delicious cookies and who was now back in their lives. Robert watched us with a mixture of joy and regret. At one point, while the children were playing on the swings, he sat next to me on the bench. "Thank you for giving me this chance, Mom," he said in a low voice. "I know I don't deserve it." I looked at him, seeing beyond the man who had kicked me out of the house, recognizing the child I had once held in my arms, the rebellious teenager who had worried me, the young man who had tried to make his way in the world. "We all deserve second chances, Robert," I finally replied. "Even you, even me." His eyes shone with held-back tears, and I knew that, despite everything that had happened, despite the pain and the betrayal, we were on the right path, not towards forgetting, because some things are never forgotten, but towards forgiveness, towards a new way of relating, based on mutual respect and the recognition of our mistakes and our strengths. Returning home that afternoon, I felt light, as if I had dropped a weight I had carried for too long. I told Peter every detail of the encounter, reliving the happy moments, sharing the small victories of connection. "You know what's most curious?" I told him as we made dinner together. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to choose between my past and my present, between my blood family and the family I've built with you, with my friends, with my colleagues. "Because you don't have to choose," he replied with that quiet wisdom I valued so much in him. "The heart has space for everyone, as long as everyone respects their place." And that's how, gradually, the pieces of my life began to fit together in a new way. It wasn't the life I had imagined having at 68, but in many ways it was better. I had a job I was passionate about and where I was valued. I had a home shared with a man who loved me for who I was, not for what I could do for him. I had friends like Eleanor and Eleanor, who had been by my side in the darkest moments, and I was rebuilding, step by step, the relationship with my children, setting new boundaries, creating new ways of being together. One Sunday, almost a year after that initial reunion with my children, we hosted a meal at our apartment. Peter and I cooked together, turning our kitchen into an organized chaos of delicious smells and shared laughter. The table was set for 7, Peter and I, my 3 children, and Martin and Sophia, who now came to visit me regularly. It was the first time everyone would be together in our space, in our home. As we waited for them to arrive, Peter hugged me from behind and kissed me softly. Who would have thought that night they kicked you out of the house, that one day you would be here surrounded by love with a full life? The question made me reflect. I remembered the despair, the fear, the cold of that night, and I contrasted that memory with the warmth, security, and joy I felt now. "No one," I replied sincerely. "Not even in my most optimistic dreams would I have imagined this." The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of our guests. Peter went to open it, while I put the finishing touches on the table. I heard voices mingle in the hallway, my children's deeper voices, Martin's enthusiastic one, Sophia's sweet one, and then the sound of footsteps approaching the kitchen. "Grandma!" Sophia exclaimed, running towards me with open arms. I received her with a warm hug, feeling her small body vibrate with joy against mine. Martin, more reserved but equally affectionate, waited his turn to hug me. My children came in next, each with a small gift. Robert with a bouquet of flowers, Lisa with a box of chocolates, Tom with a plant for our balcony. Simple but meaningful gestures, expressions of respect and affection. We sat down at the table, a diverse group united by blood ties, love, and in some cases, hard-earned forgiveness. Conversation flowed, punctuated by laughter and anecdotes, some new, others revisited from a new perspective. At one point, while serving dessert, a custard I had made following my mother's recipe, Robert raised his glass. "I'd like to propose a toast," he said, drawing everyone's attention. "To you, Mom. To your strength, your dignity, your ability to forgive without forgetting. You've taught us more in this year than we learned in a lifetime." Lisa and Tom raised their glasses, nodding emotionally. Peter squeezed my hand under the table, proud. "And to family," Robert added. "Not the one we thought it should be, but the one we are building together, day by day, with respect and true love." Glasses clinked, glances crossed with deep meanings that went beyond words. And at that moment, I felt an absolute certainty. I had found my path. I had rebuilt my life from the ashes. I had transformed the cruelest abandonment into the most beautiful opportunity. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself alone for a moment on the balcony, contemplating the city stretching out under the sunset sky. Peter joined me in silence, putting his arm around my waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. "About life," I replied. "About how sometimes what seems like the end is just a new beginning. About how pain can be transformed into growth, loneliness into independence, abandonment into freedom." He nodded, understanding perfectly what I meant. "Do you regret anything?" he asked after a moment of shared silence. I thought about it carefully. Did I regret the years dedicated to a family that had been capable of kicking me out? Not having built my independence sooner? Not having valued my own power until I was forced to discover it? No, I replied finally. Every step, even the painful ones, has brought me here, and here is exactly where I want to be. Peter smiled, kissing my temple tenderly. "Then you have won, Evelyn. You have won the most difficult battle of all, finding peace with your own path." We went back inside, where my children, my grandchildren, and this wonderful man I had found in my second chance at life were waiting for me. All of them parts of a puzzle I had reassembled in a new, unexpected but perfect way. And I knew, with a certainty that warmed my heart, that this was my true victory. Not just having survived the abandonment, but having flourished from it. Not just having forgiven, but having learned to love again, starting with myself. Because in the end, that was the most valuable lesson of this whole experience. Learning that my worth did not depend on who loved me or abandoned me, but on my own ability to get up every day, to create, to love, to be. And as I watched my family gathered, I thought of all the women who, like me, had been discarded when their usefulness seemed to run out. All the mothers, wives, grandmothers who had been made to feel they had nothing left to offer. And I wished that all of them could discover, as I had, that it is never too late to start over, that it is never too late to find your own voice, that it is never too late to be happy. Because I, Evelyn Miller, at 70, had discovered that life can knock you down with its worst blow, but you always, always have the option to get up and write a new chapter. A chapter where you are the protagonist, not the secondary character. A chapter where your worth is determined by no one but yourself. And that is the story I want to tell. The story of how I lost everything, only to find myself. The story of how, in the twilight of my life, I discovered that it was just dawning. 5 years have passed since that night my children kicked me out of the house. Today, at 73, I live a life I never imagined possible. Peter and I got married 2 years ago in an intimate ceremony surrounded by our loved ones. It was a decision made out of love and freedom, not out of necessity or social convention. My children were witnesses. My grandchildren carried the rings. And my friends from the center, Eleanor and Eleanor, held places of honor. I still work at the hotel, although now only 3 days a week. Not because I need the money, but because I enjoy what I do, because I value the independence it gives me, and because I want to continue contributing my experience and creativity. The other days I dedicate to living, simply living, something I forgot to do for so many years while I was busy taking care of others. I read, I walk, I tend my garden on the balcony. I enjoy Peter's company. I see my grandchildren, who are now 3, with the arrival of little Evelyn, Tom's daughter, named in my honor. The relationship with my children has largely healed, although it will never be exactly the same as before, and that's okay. What we have now is more authentic, based on mutual respect, and not on obligation or guilt. We love each other, but from a place of freedom, not dependence. Sometimes when I look back at that dark night, when I found myself on the street with a suitcase and a broken heart, I almost feel grateful. Not for the pain, not for the cruelty, but for the opportunity it gave me to rediscover myself, to reconnect with the strong, capable, and dignified woman I always was, but had forgotten along the way. I have learned that life doesn't end at 60, or at 70, or even at 80. That there is always time for a new beginning, for a new adventure, for a new love. That age is just numbers, and what really matters is the vitality of the spirit, the desire to keep learning, growing, being surprised. And if you, who are reading this story, find yourself in a dark moment, if you feel that you have lost everything, that there is no hope left, that life is over, remember my story. Remember that I was there too, in that abyss, and I found the strength to take one step, and then another, and another. Remember that there is always, always a new dawn waiting for you. You just have to be brave enough to open your eyes and see it.